So let's take a minute to talk about what we call the chain of motion in sword fighting or long sword fighting, spear work, axes, halberds, whatever. Boxing, striking of all sorts. So the chain of motion is how you could derive power into a melee strike with melee weapons or hands. Normally it starts with the ground and your feet upon the ground. Let me back up a little bit here. Okay, so normally it starts from the ground, with your feet on the ground. Normally it'll be whatever leg is furthest back. It will start the chain of motion by driving up from the ground, say with the ball of your foot pushing up, pulling with your calf. So that's two parts engaged, right? Here and here. Then you also pass that force through the upper leg. So in your guard or wherever it is, it's a spring forward or rotational. And you're carrying that force through there, through the foot, the lower leg, the upper leg, into the glutes and the hip area. And then this area here is rotating forward, which rotates the torso, the chest, then the shoulders come into it, and the pectoral pulls. So this is the chain so far. It's like from here, boom, it springs forward, and then your pectoral pulls, pulling the upper arm across, your tricep extends here, your forearm pulls down on the wrist, and then the wrist aligns, and then you squeeze the fingers at the end. So it's actually a chain. The chain of motion comes all the way from the ground, through the hip area, through the chest, through the shoulder, through the upper arm, boom, through the forearm, and then to the wrist, the hand, and then the fingers. So it's essentially, don't even keep track nowadays. Let me set this forward. I'll drive with the other foot. It's just a subtle thing, but you can see the lifting, right? So you drive with, starting with the back foot, through the calf, through the upper leg, through the glutes and the hips, rotating that which rotates your torso in the direction forward on your weapon side, to your chest, which pulls, your pectorals pull, your shoulder pulls forward, your tricep starts to extend, your forearm pulls this way, your wrist, which pulls your wrist in, and then at the last bit, you trigger the fingers. So the entire motion is driven from the ground. So the entire chain of motion drives from the back foot, all the way through the legs, through the hips and glutes, through the core, to the chest, to the shoulders, and to the upper arm, lower arm, wrist, palm, fingers, to develop the most power you can get in a strike with a sword, with a spear. Boom, you drive still. With a long sword, with an axe, with whatever. That's the full chain of motion that we're talking about. It's also important to understand that's the ideal situation. There's going to be times when you cannot engage the entire chain of motion. When you can't engage the entire chain of motion, like generate your pristine your shots properly, you're going to have to rely on a partial chain of motion. That can be anywhere from above the lower leg, above just to the hip where you're standing so you're not pushing off the ground, you're just going to rotate a little bit, to where you're just going to be able to get your chest and your shoulder in, what some people call arming a shot, you know? Plenty able to hit hard enough with just your arm, even just the elbow and hand. Without any rotation, you can still get a lot of power out of the partial chain of motion. Point is, there's going to be times when you can't rotate your hips into something, when you can't push from the ground and use the full chain of motion. This is super common in close range, when you're in the middle of recovering to another strike, like you're already extended here, how are you gonna get your hips into the other one? You know, you can like bring it back and rotate this way, but what if you're taking a step at the same time? When your foot is off the ground, you can't actually push off the ground. You can't put your hips into a strike if your foot's off the ground. You know, well, okay, maybe somebody can. Few people, it's highly ineffective, right? You have to be able to throw with the full chain of motion and the partial chain of motion. That's why here at the school we teach a lot of times for people to be able to throw with just a third of the chain of motion or half the chain of motion by committing your chest, pectorals, shoulder, upper arm, lower arm, wrist, hand, and fingers into a shot. Boom, boom, boom. You can still develop a heck of a lot of power with the proper motion, with the proper training, without like rotating yourself out crazy back and forth. So train for full chain of motion, but also train for partial chain of motion. Work your way back from finger exercises to moving your wrist and fingers, right? To moving your forearm and fingers, see the upper arm still. Then engage your upper arm and elbow into it. Boom, boom. Then engage your shoulder into it a little more, and then engage your pectoral into it. Boom, boom. You'll be able to actually generate plenty of force that way. It's not ideal for a lot of people. It's just practicality, and it works. So that's the abbreviated chain of motion. Just wanted to go over it with you guys so that you can understand why a lot of times when people are throwing shots, they'll just toss out something and they won't put their hips at all into it. It's just, and just using their arms to generate shots. You can do it. It takes time, it takes training, and it takes committing to it. But if you're always obsessed about getting the full chain of motion, you're gonna have a very, very static Kung Fu style. And it's gonna be very limited. Now, some guys do amazingly great with it, right? And that's great, but look at the vast majority of fighters. The vast majority of fighters need options.